Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Cara Snyder. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Engagement at UC Santa Cruz. And I'm also an alumna, Crown College, class of 2006. Alumni Engagement and Career Success are excited to bring you today's event as part of Virtual Alumni Week. Today, Marcia Wall, a UCSC alumna and career counselor, will help you identify if you experience imposter syndrome and help you develop strategies to overcome it. Before we meet Marcia, I want to provide some housekeeping items. Please note we will be recording this program and we'll make it available on the Career Success YouTube channel. Today's program will be a mini workshop, so please be prepared to take some notes, whether on paper and pen or on your computer, and participate in the activities. You'll get the most out of it that way. A survey will populate after the event, and we hope that you will take the time to respond. Please feel free at any time to submit questions via the Zoom Q&A box, and we'll leave some time at the end to get to those questions. So as mentioned, today's event is part of Virtual Alumni Week. We've got over 70 events, and there's something for everyone. We hope you join us at some of the other events. They're open to everyone. And you can learn more at alumniweekend.ucsc.edu, which Taylor will put in the Zoom box for everyone. And okay, with that, we hope you're looking forward to the program as much as we are. And now I would like to hand things over to Marcia.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Marcia Wall. I also use she, her pronouns, and we're going to jump right into it. So thank you as we get started. There we go. Thanks for your patience. So as Cara said, this is good enough, a guide to overcoming imposter syndrome. And she said, my name is Marcia Wall. I'm with Stevenson 1992. If you want to contact me at some point, you can, mwall1000@gmail. There's also a link there to my LinkedIn profile, and I know Taylor's going to put that in the chat as well. Every slug, whether you're a student or an alum, we'll talk for 30 minutes, absolutely free. Just tell me what's on your mind, and I'll see if I can be of service. And if you decide to work with me on a long-term basis, you also get 20% off services. So you can always say that it pays to be a slug. Some of you, all of you actually should have gotten this worksheet earlier via an email through Taylor, and you can have it out right now, or if you just want to have maybe a sheet of paper with 4 different lines so you can record your values, strengths, skills, accomplishments, and educational accomplishments, you can have that ready to go. If you just want to take mental notes with that, that's fine, but we will be using this later on in the presentation. So today we're going to define what imposter syndrome is, including its causes, examples of it, how it manifests in our lives. And we're also going to identify evidence that suggests that you are not an imposter, that affirms your personal and professional worth. And then finally, brainstorm some ways to deal with imposter syndrome. There we go. So imposter syndrome, I want you to just think for yourself. What do you think of when you think of the word imposter syndrome? And in a minute, we're going to take a poll, but just for 30 seconds, when you hear that phrase, what does it mean to you? No need to share, just think. Could be a feeling, could be a picture in your mind. You might think of a synonym. And as you're thinking about that, we are going to take a poll. You can, Taylor's going to put the poll up. There you go. How confident do you feel in your professional identity? And another way of asking that is, do you feel like an imposter? Not confident at all? Somewhat unconfident, neither confident nor, sort of neutral, somewhat confident or very confident, right? So in terms of imposter syndrome, is there a lot of it or a lot of it? Where do you fit on that scale? You can go ahead and vote. And Taylor, will that pop up for all of us to see?
Yes, the poll is up. Everyone is now voting, and I'll make it visible in just a minute.
All right, fantastic.
We'll let it go for 10 more seconds and then I'll
Okay.
end.
I think we're going to find some trends as we're looking at the answers, and we're going to take this poll again at the end and have you think about that question again and see how you're feeling after the next 40, 45, 50 minutes together. Aha. So somewhat confident, 47%. We have about 20% in between not confident and somewhat unconfident. And only about 6% feeling like, woohoo, I feel totally confident. So that seems about right. We're going to move through this presentation and we're going to ask ourselves at the end if it changes at all. Okay. So imposter syndrome is basically the idea that you've only succeeded due to luck, not because of your talent or time or qualifications. That's from Time magazine. It can also be called a psychological phenomena in which people are unable to internalize their accomplishments. It's a collection of feelings of inadequacy that persist despite evident success. It's another way of just feeling insecure about who you are professionally. So we call it a syndrome, but it's really something that we all just sort of feel every day. And the question is, what causes imposter syndrome? Sometimes we internalize messages from family, close personal relationships, partners. Maybe we didn't always get the message that we were good enough or that we were smart enough or that we've accomplished enough. And sometimes we take those feelings and internalize them. What's also really common is if you don't see yourself reflected in academic and professional settings, maybe due to systemic racism, sexism, ableism, transphobia, homophobia, or other forms of oppression, if in your work environment, your scholastic environment, you don't see people who look like you, who act like you, who come where you come from, right? Sometimes then it's hard to think of yourself as belonging in those situations. And that's not anything that you're to blame for, right? It's just the situation, and we unconsciously take those messages into our brains and they kind of live within us, whether we want them to or not. Sometimes it's just plain old negative self-talk, perfectionist thinking. Also, if you have ever dealt with a mental illness, perhaps, sometimes when we're feeling down, our self-confidence is a little bit lower. So there's 1,000,003 reasons why people have these feelings. And question is, what are some of those feelings? What are some of those thoughts that we have? I'm not smart enough. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm not educated enough. I'm not good enough. I don't live up to people's expectations. Kind of take a look at some of these and just put a thumbs up in the chat if you've experienced some of these feelings or feelings like this. I'll never live up to expectations. I'm not going to hire me. Someone's going to find out that I'm a fake. I haven't earned my success. It was all due to luck and circumstance. I'm not stable enough, right? Everyone else is more qualified than I am. So we're definitely seeing that there's other people out there who are sort of feeling the same way. And I'm sure if we were all sharing in a Zoom room, some of you could also share with me what some of those other feelings that you have. So the question is, and you probably already know the answer, is who has imposter syndrome? And I know silently in your brains, you're already coming up with the answer to that. And the answer is virtually everyone and no one, right? Virtually everyone has felt some sort of insecurity in their lifetime. Very accomplished, powerful, famous people. Maya Angelou, Einstein, Oprah Winfrey, Tom Hanks, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, probably Alex Trebek. And at the same time, in a way, no one has imposter syndrome. It's kind of a misnomer, actually, right? It's not a disease. It's not something that you can contract. It's not a virus like COVID, right? It's just a set of feelings where you don't always feel like your best self, and that's completely normal. So, when you're having those days where you're thinking, you know what, I can't do this, or I don't have what it takes, or no one believes in me, start comparing yourself to some of these folks and you're like, well, if they felt that way and I feel that way, then it's probably pretty normal that I feel that way. So as I said before, the truth is that bias practices across institutions routinely stymie the ability of individuals from underrepresented groups to thrive. Um, and it's just true. We see it time and time again. That's why we're seeing more than ever diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives going on in the workplace and in academic spaces, because everyone has to be represented. If you don't see yourself represented in some kind of way, then you may not feel like you belong. And that could include a lot of different groups: women, LGBTQIA plus individuals, immigrants, BIPOC individuals, undocumented folks. If you're a first generation student or a first generation professional, like my parents were, you may not have had those role models growing up, and you didn't see yourself necessarily in that situation. We're also talking about neurodiverse people, and that might be people on the autism spectrum or with Asperger's, for example. If you're differently abled, if you've got mental health challenges, which we all do, right? During the pandemic, every single person has some sort of mental health challenge. But if you've had something that is pervasive or ongoing, and you don't see others who are open and out about their mental illness in the workplace, you may not have models for what that looks like. Even religious minorities, right? If you don't see someone maybe who's wearing a hijab, for example, or you don't see people from your own religion in the workplace, you're wondering, where do I belong? Where are the people who look like me? Where are the people that think like me? And if I don't look like and think like the other people in the work environment, what are they going to think of me? So if you're feeling that way, it's totally normal, right? Imposter syndrome, these feelings are 100% normal, and they're nothing to worry about. If you didn't have these feelings, then I would be concerned perhaps that you weren't being a little bit self-reflective. So the question now is, how do we deal with it? Well, very big right now is data collection, right? Data analysis, data collection, data science is huge. And data have always been the key to looking at evidence. And so today we're going to engage in some data collection and data analysis. And if you have your worksheet out, or if you have something on your computer, some notes where you're taking notes about your own values, your education, your skills and strengths and accomplishments, we're going to take an inventory of these things right now. And we're going to see how you can sort of keep this information. So when imposter syndrome feelings come up, you can kind of reflect, look at what the evidence is, and that will sort of help you to deal with some of those feelings. So if you have this worksheet out, that's great. If you have something that looks like it, that's fantastic. If you have something going on your computer, if you're someone who has a real photographic memory and you want to take notes in your mind, that works too. But we are going to get right down to it. So what are we talking about when we talk about values? We're talking about, what kind of person are you, right? Are you kind? Are you caring? And I know Taylor's going to be chatting out a list of values that you can, a link that you can take a look at. Are you helpful, compassionate? Just kind of take a breath for a moment, pause, reflect on your own, and say, what are the 5 words that I would use to describe my very best self? What are the 5 words that my best friends or my partner or someone who really cares about me, what would they have to say about me? So we're going to take a few moments of silence for you to reflect on that. My guess is that you're coming up with some awesome things. And I encourage you to keep writing this list, whether it is, throughout this workshop today, but I really encourage you to keep this list going and keep adding to it, well beyond today, maybe for a long time in the future. But take the time to think about these things and really identify what makes you, you. Another career counselor I know, I love him to death, and he says, the world needs your fabulousness. And he's absolutely right about that. And that's perhaps the best piece of career advice I've ever heard in my entire life. So whatever makes you fabulous, that's what makes you you, and that's why you're not an imposter. So here's some other core values you can take a look at. Maybe you are optimistic, peaceful, inclusive. Look at your core values. Again, I think Taylor is tweeting this out, but if there are any last words that you want to put in your list, go ahead and do that now. Trustworthy, successful, respectful. The world needs your fabulousness. The other thing that makes you awesome is that you have strengths and skills, right? They could be what we call transferable skills like leadership, collaboration, communication, teaching, problem solving, organizational skills, languages, writing, public speaking. One of the ways to figure out what your strengths and skills are to look at a resume that you've written. You could even Google your job title and say, what are the resume words for this job title? And you'll probably get a long list and you'll say, wow, I do have those skills and talents and abilities. I just never really thought of them before. You can also, if you, especially if you're in the workplace, you can look back to your performance evaluations that you've done with your supervisors and see what has been notated as your strengths and skills. So it's not that you just have to sit there and think about them and make them up, but you can actually look to evidence for those sorts of things. Strengths and skills can also be technical skills, more important than ever, especially during the pandemic. Microsoft Office 365, social media, database management. Again, take a look at your job description. Think about the projects that you've worked on in the past. Think about if you're a student or a recent graduate, you can think back to what skills did I have to use to get that term paper done, to get that project done, to write that essay, to create that online project. And other skills may be things that you don't necessarily get paid for that are academic in nature, but stuff that you're just really good at, right? Maybe you're a really good baker. Maybe you are really good at plumbing. Your skills that you identify don't necessarily have to be work related. There's a lot of things that make up who we are, that make us fabulous. And whether or not we actually use those things directly in our job doesn't necessarily make a difference. It's all evidence that we're not imposters, that we have a lot to offer. So if you haven't already, on your worksheet, maybe write down a few strengths and skills that immediately come to mind, or at the very least, stop and make a note somewhere that, you know what, I'm going to go back and look at my performance evaluations. I'm going to ask my coworkers about this. I'm going to review the projects that I've done. I'm going to stop and take the time to actually do analysis, right? This is data analysis. This is data collection. And this is the kind of thing that you can use to look back and reflect upon and remind yourself why you're so fabulous. Similarly, and this kind of goes along with what I was saying before, is that you can take a look at your accomplishments. What are accomplishments? Things that you've done professionally, it could be paid, volunteer, even academic, that demonstrate what you can do. And what do I mean by that? These are things that, typically people will look to their job duties to put on their resume, but really what you need to do is stop and think, not what I was supposed to do, but what did I actually do? So if for example, your job description is to provide customer service, that's wonderful. But if you can quantify that and say provided outstanding customer service to 200 people daily, that really gives you as well as others a sense of what you can actually accomplish. Again, maybe your job description or something you're good at is social media, and that is an outstanding skill to have. But if you can actually say, I gained 6,000 plus Instagram followers in 4 months, that gives people a snapshot of what you can actually accomplish. So take just about 30 seconds or so and begin to brainstorm in your own mind, what are the things that I have done? Can I point to a project? Can I point to something I did at work? Can I point to a volunteer activity that I was engaged in? And, it doesn't have to be something that's overarching or that, encompasses entirely what you've done at your job. Um, the team at UC Santa Cruz, one thing that they can all put on their resumes from now on is that they conducted a virtual alumni week. That's huge, hasn't been done before. And, being able to talk about that and how many different presentations have been made and how many people worked on the project, that's going to tell a story to other people. But more importantly, when you really stop and look at what you've accomplished, you're like, wow, I'm actually really good at this. And I will share with you that that's been the case for me. When I update my resume, I'm like, wow, I'm actually a lot better than I thought I was. And so keeping your resume up to date and adding accomplishments, that can be another way to sort of reinforce to yourself that you're not an imposter. You've already got this, right? You've already got the skills and accomplishments. So take a few seconds, write down something that comes to mind. If you don't know something off the top of your head, just make a note. Go look at your performance evaluations, talk with people you know, coworkers. If you worked on a group project with somebody in class, that could be something as well to take a look at. Education, and you may be thinking, why are we talking about education? Well, all either UC Santa Cruz students or graduates, and of course, we're educated, right? And you are. And that's fantastic. And that's something that you should always be proud of. And that's certainly an accomplishment. However, there are many forms of education that we get in our lifetime, and it's important to keep track of those as well, because they're another way to for us to affirm that we have a lot to offer. So, maybe you go into UC Santa Cruz right now and you're a graduate, you can certainly put that education on your resume. If you got an associate's, perhaps you've also been to trade school. My own hairdresser has an MBA, has her own hair care product line, and she also has a degree in cosmetology. Having that college degree and a trade degree are not mutually exclusive. Perhaps you got a certificate through some sort of program, right? Like maybe taking a class through Udemy or LinkedIn Learning, perhaps. I know many libraries offer free classes, and I'm taking one in Excel right now. And when I'm done, that's something I'm going to be able to put on my resume. That's another, not just my resume, but for me, it reaffirms, you know what? I'm an ongoing learner. I know how to upgrade my skills. I have something additional to offer now. OJT, you may or may not be familiar with that. It stands for on the job training. And that may include like an apprenticeship, perhaps an internship through the school, any sort of job shadowing we've done, any sort of training program, and also professional development. If you're not familiar with that term, it's another way of saying lifelong learning or ongoing learning. You may attend some workshops in your place of business or with a program that you belong to, or maybe you're on the board of some sort of organization and they do professional development workshops. Perhaps you are going through a mentor program. Many students, when they come out of college, will enter management training programs through Geico, through Enterprise. I know those are two really big ones, but they also have them like AmeriCorps, for example. Once you leave college, if you enter into AmeriCorps, that's a professional development training program. And that's something that you can look at and say, wow, that's something else I learned. That's where I've gained more knowledge. This is why I have even more to offer. And I'm sure that all of you right now are reflecting, and as you're looking back at some of this and thinking to yourselves, wow, I didn't realize that 3-day retreat that I went on when we learned how to combat white supremacy was actually part of my education. I didn't realize that when I sat in an 8-hour training at work all day on motivational interview, that's something that I should put on my resume, or that's something that I should be thinking about. So what I hope, and we're not quite done here, but what I hope is that you keep this list going in all of these categories, and maybe keep it by your bedside and make some notes when thoughts come to you in the middle of the night. Perhaps, you have it on your phone, and as soon as something comes up, you make a note about it. Or maybe you actually take time once a week to sit down and reflect for 30 minutes in each of those categories and say, what did I accomplish this week that I can add to that? Or what did I realize about myself this week that I can add to this list? Think of it as an ongoing list of your fabulousness, and use it as a reminder, when you're having some of those imposter feelings. Now, does everyone take a breath? Question is, how do you keep imposter syndrome at bay? I guarantee you, no matter how old you are, no matter how educated you are, no matter what you look like or where you come from, you're going to have these feelings pop up in your life from time to time. It is absolutely normal. One of the ways, though, that you can mitigate the effects of imposter syndrome is to find mentors, perhaps professors, people at work, that look like you, that act like you, that think like you, or that, quite frankly, just share your values or share your passions. It is important to be able to connect with people who are further along in their careers, they can share their wisdom, right? Even if you've been in the workforce for 30 years, there's always someone who has more experience than you do. Or perhaps they don't have as much experience, but they have more experience in a different area. So finding those people that can be your confidence, people that will be able to sort of share the secrets with you, people who will be able to emotionally bolster you along the way, I think is really important. No one should go it alone. And kind of speaking to that as well is that there are many professional organizations and employment resource groups out there that can be beneficial to you. What do I mean by supportive professional organizations? Some of you are probably thinking, I have no idea what that means. And some of you are thinking, I know exactly what that means. A supportive professional organization might be, for example, Black Journalists of America. An employment resource group, might be an API organization at Google or, at your place of business. There are all sorts of organizations out there that are tailored to all sorts of different groups, all sorts of different beliefs. Even the American Medical Association, they're going to have subgroups as well. You need to go out and find your tribe. You need to be able to find the folks that think like you, that share your values, that are doing the same kind of work. And I'm not suggesting that you only have a cohort with people that are exactly like you, but I do think it's important that as you're growing your professional career, and if you really want to be affirmed, to have other fabulous people around you, people that nurture you, people that feed your spirit, people that energize you, because that's going to be so important. Careers are one of the biggest aspects of our life, and career satisfaction is important. And feeling nourished by other people in our professional circles is one of the ways to make that happen. Now, that being said, there's a lot through UCSC that you can access as well. You're already doing it right now with the Alumni Association Professional and Career Services Department. They have so much to offer, and I know Taylor's going to be chatting out some of the links to these resources. The next one is huge that most people don't know about, and I'm probably guessing that most alumni have never used, and that is the Career Advice Network. It's a free service, and Taylor's going to chat out about that. And basically what it is, it's alumni from all different walks of life, from all different types of professions, academic backgrounds, who are there willing, able, at no charge to talk to you and to be a mentor. You may sign up to speak with them about what is it like to be a nurse practitioner? What is it like to, what is it really like to be a teacher in this day and age? What are UX and UI all about, right? Those are questions you may have, and you may not know the first place to start to ask people those questions. But if you go to the Career Advice Network, you're going to find people who are going to be able to answer those questions for you. There's also people like me on there who will be willing to do mock interviews, resume reviews, informational interviewing. I cannot encourage you enough to go check that out. If you're on campus, feel free to talk with an EOP advisor. on campus, and also seek counseling, and that is through the healthcare center there on campus. There are a lot of resources out there for you. If you don't know what resources you need, you can actually probably start with the health center and say, hey, I'm looking for some resources on campus. I'm not sure where to go, or go to an EOP advisor, talk with the alumni association. Don't be afraid to ask for help. No one gets through life alone, and we always succeed better because of each other. So having said all that, you know how fabulous you are. You've done the data collection, right? You're going to continue to do that data collection. You know that there's resources out there through UC Santa Cruz, but there's also things that you can do for yourself. Review what you learned today. When times are tough and you're thinking, I don't know if I can handle this, go back and look at how fabulous you are, right? Look for that evidence. The other thing I would highly suggest too is that you really take heart about the suggestions around self-care. Self-care has always been important. It has become even more important during the pandemic. I think it has gotten a lot more press during the pandemic. And I think that institutions and companies and organizations are really beginning to realize how important self-care is to personal development, but also to professional development as well. If we don't come nourished, then we cannot give our best in the workplace. And so whatever it is you do to be calm, to affirm yourself, to get centered, some people meditate, some people exercise, some people visualize. I've taken to gardening. These things that sort of keep you calm are the things that can mitigate the anxiety that imposter syndrome may bring up for you. So question is, we've been talking for about 30 minutes or so. The question is, how do you feel now? So Taylor, we're going to pull up that poll again. And you're going to reflect on the question that you did at the very beginning, which is, how confident do you feel in your professional identity? And I'm looking to see if there's been even a little bit of change in the last 30 minutes or so that we have been speaking. Not confident? Still not feeling confident? Are you a little bit more confident? Kind of like on the fence, I don't know how I'm feeling. Are you feeling like, yeah, you know what? I started looking at some of these things that I wrote down, and I was thinking upon what you were saying, and I really realized that I've got a lot more to offer than I, thought I did, and I'm feeling a little bit better about the whole situation. And perhaps you're thinking, wow, all I had to do was write this stuff down, and now I realize how much I've got going on. I didn't, realize that other people felt this way. I didn't realize that really famous and high achieving people, feel this way, the same way too. So maybe that number has gone up a little bit. I know when we were looking at the very confident, last time it was about 3%. So it'll be very interesting to see what comes up. And if it hasn't changed for you, that's okay.
I'm going to close the poll now.
Okay. Wow. Look, oh my gosh, that is outstanding. We went from about, I think it was 3 or 6% about feeling very confident to now 20%, 1/5 of the people here. And that somewhat confident has really increased as well. So, in the last 30, 45 minutes, what have you, there's already been substantial growth. And I think that's fantastic. And what I also think is that if you continue to do some of these things that I've suggested, to take inventory, to affirm yourself, to connect with people that are in your personal and professional tribe that nourish you and that support you. And if you, weekly take stock of your value, I think that number is going to continue to go up and up and up. So I thank you on behalf of UC Santa Cruz for that. And I think now, Cara, we're going to open it to questions.
We sure are.
All right, I'll stop sharing my screen. There we go.
Thank you, Marcia.
You're welcome.
That was great. I definitely have felt imposter syndrome off and on throughout my life. It doesn't go away. I'm in my 40s now. It comes and goes. We're now going to move to Q&A. So does anybody have any questions? If you do, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A box, and we'll ask them of Marcia. Anything, nothing's off limits here. I'll start with one, Marcia.
Absolutely.
When do you first remember experiencing imposter syndrome?
Oh, maybe in my teens. I felt like an outsider, even though I had a ton of friends. I was in student government, I checked all the boxes. I was going to UC Santa Cruz. I somehow felt like my friends had it more together, that they knew more, that they were more accomplished than I was. And I think it definitely hit me in my 20s. I didn't bloom as fast as my friends did. I didn't get that, real first job as quickly as everyone else did. I didn't, get my own place as quickly as everyone else did. And, I'll be quite frank, it's something that I've had to deal with throughout my career. I'd be lying if I said that I haven't experienced it sometime this month. And I want to share that to normalize that, right? Even someone who talks about these things, I experience it too. And I use those same tools to affirm myself and to sort of keep some of those feelings at bay. Because when I own my power, then I can share that power with everyone else. If I don't own my power, then I can't help to empower others. And that's really what I'm here to do.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, well, the questions are coming in now. So I'm going to go to one from Bree. Can you review what the second point for how to mitigate the symptoms or the experience of imposter syndrome is? One was review, two was...
gosh, you'd think I know it off the top of my head. Let me see. It's look for evidence, right? It's simply, and by evidence, going back to this list that you have created. Looking again at some of those performance evaluations, reflecting on your accomplishments, really affirming what your personal values are. It's really all about data collection, right? It's the 21st century thing. We're all about data collection, and it's true for imposter syndrome too.
Yeah, and I will say, I'll add to that, sometimes just having a visual reminder of that, you can write it in a journal, but having it in a place where you could see it on a daily basis can be helpful too.
No, I think that's fantastic. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
if anyone has questions about anything that was shared today, this is being recorded and you can go back and review it again if you want to. And that again will be on the Career Success YouTube channel. All right, let's go to the next question from Richard. Marcia, do you have any advice for dealing with imposter syndrome when it comes to appearance and age?
It's a very good question. And I'm not sure exactly what is meant by that question. So I'm going to try to address it as much as possible. I think, as you age, it can become more difficult to, ironically, right, to feel like that you fit in or that you're being valued. There's a lot of ageism that goes on in our culture. And, I will be the first to say that all of those isms are real and it's not just being made up in your head. But I think if you have that confidence from within, then that confidence begins to shine outward too. A lot of times I've dealt with a lot of mature workers, and I'm one of them. I'm over 50. I'm one of the mature workers in the world. And sometimes we may think that we're out of date or that people may be looking at us that way. But if we stay up to date in the way that we look, if we stay up to date in terms of our thinking and our skills and we're relevant, then we are going to be up to date regardless of our age. And Richard, I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thanks. Okay, next question I'm going to take is from MG. First, it's a statement.
I think I know MG.
Oh, really? Okay.
I do.
How is it possible to achieve so much academically, but still feel imposter syndrome if you were a transfer student? And this is, MG says that they're pursuing a master's at Stanford. And so, yeah, transfer students experience something different. Can you speak to that?
Yes, I think so. I think sometimes when people start off at a community college, there is some sort of stigma, and I hope this is what I'm answering that question, right? Um, that there's a stigma like, oh, you went there because you couldn't get into school, or you went there because your family couldn't afford it, or you went there for all of these other reasons that somehow are a reflect of a lack on your part. And the truth of the matter is that we all start where we start, and we start where we need to start, and that's okay. And, I think sometimes the idea of imposter syndrome because comes from the fact that we feel like we're supposed to arrive at some point, that at some point we are going to reach the destination that proves we're worthy enough. We got the right job. We went to the right school. We know the right people. We have the right degrees. We're well known enough in our field. And even personally, right, if we marry the right person, if we buy the right house, that somehow when we make these achievements, that these are going to externally affirm that we're worthy enough. And when in fact, we really have to own that worth within ourselves, because nothing outside of ourselves can affirm who we are. We're the only ones that can do that for ourselves.
Good points. I like to normalize too for recent graduates and seniors that about 70% of the workforce doesn't work in an industry that relates to their undergraduate degree. And people change their
Absolutely.
jobs and careers 3 to 5 times in their lifetime. So that first job out of college isn't necessarily going to mean that you made it, kind of relating to your most previous comments. Great.
No, I think that's super important too, that and if there's one thing I've learned over 30 years since graduating college, is that I had no idea what the journey would look like, but it's been a lot of fun.
Okay, thanks. Okay, next question is from Claire. Can you speak on what seems to be heavy academic influence biases? Example, persons who might believe achieving a particular degree at a particular school matters in extreme ways, or that a bad grade long ago is indicative of one's present abilities.
If you're thinking about what other people might think about that, the truth of the matter is that none of us have any control over what anyone else thinks, right? So we sort of have to let that go. Um, I think that those feelings come about, it's really an internal thing, right? We can't control what other people are thinking, but maybe we're imposing that perceived judgment on ourselves. Like, you know what? I failed that class, and somehow that's proof that I'm not smart enough or not good enough. When really, if you were to take a look at that one failed class compared to all the other ones that you passed, um, it's just a drop in the bucket. It's not even really a failure. It was just data collection. You're like, oh, that didn't work for me. Now I went and found out what I am good at, what did work for me. And in terms of prestige, in terms of schools, I will tell you that a friend of mine was vice president at a very large organization in New Orleans. When resumes come to his office, before he gives them to any hiring managers, he removes the names of all schools from those resumes. And I think increasingly, and I hope this continues, what we're seeing in the workplace and with hiring managers is that everyone is attempting literally and figuratively to remove some of those biases that could be perceived through a resume, so that the people who are being hired are hired because they're qualified, not because of where they went to school.
True. I'll add too that on the grades question, I'm one of those UC Santa Cruz students that never had a grade. I had all narrative evaluations, you too.
Yeah.
Nobody has ever asked me to show proof of how well I did to get my degree.
Yeah, and I would say, as soon as you're done graduating, do not put your GPA on your resume. It's completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
And I too, I didn't get any grades, and I still remember the one evaluation where they said that I bombed a midterm. And I thought, if I had gotten a grade, it would have been a B, and that would have completely been hidden. But if anyone to this day wants to read that, they'll see that I failed my French midterm.
All right, next question from Patty. How do you balance the feeling of being an imposter when you're doing something in a volunteer capacity in a meeting or et cetera, with paid professionals in the field?
Well, I don't think it matters really whether you're getting paid or not. The work is the work, the experience is the experience. And, if you're talking about, well, I did this as a volunteer instead of getting paid for it, it's really up to you to communicate to yourself as well as to anyone else, whether that's in a resume or a networking situation or an interview, what you accomplished and how what you accomplished can benefit other people. Um, I think increasingly, I'm glad that you all went to UC Santa Cruz. I'm glad that everyone got a college degree, but what's also increasingly important is not necessarily what you learned, but what you're capable of doing now. People are less interested in the past as they are in the future. And I think if you are able to communicate your value, whether it was paid or not, you're going to be able to do that. But you have to own that first. Everyone, you have to own your power and your confidence before you can communicate that to anyone else.
And as someone who works with volunteers like yourself, Marcia, as one of our career coaches, and we've been on many events for career success and alumni at UCSC, we want to keep you. We value volunteers so much. If you're at a table with paid professionals, they are happy that you're there and they want to retain you. So they're going to value what you bring to the table and what you offer.
And I will just add to that very quickly that volunteering is one of the best ways to get experience. It's absolutely one of the best ways to network. And it's also a way to refresh your skills, make connections. And especially if you're not doing paid work at the time, instead of, in the pandemic, sort of sitting home and baking that next sourdough bread, doing something that really affirms your own professional worth.
And there's ways that we volunteer that we sometimes discredit, even if it's just helping a friend with their business. If you consulted with them on a particular component, that counts. That counts as skills and experience. You don't have to be on the board or if had to shown up for a shift to volunteer. There's lots of ways that people volunteer.
Absolutely.
All right, our next question. I'm going to scan this. Can you address a little bit more the issues of Black, Indigenous, people of color professionals who overwhelmingly feel imposter syndrome, especially because most of the institutions, policies functioning are based on a white supremacist society?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to affirm again that that is absolutely the truth. And so, if you have these feelings of either I don't belong or, I think I should belong, but I don't, those are absolutely valid feelings. And so the question becomes it's not just up to you to say, well, I'm enough and they should know that I'm enough, right? It's really incumbent upon all of us to work for systemic change. And I think when you work for systemic change, when you're able to be vocal about those sort of things, whether it's in the workplace or in your professional community in some way, then some of those feelings begin to change because you realize it's not about you. It's about the system that is out there. And it's about the system that's out there. It's not about you. And I think that's always important to keep in mind, that not to internalize that, right? That's somebody else's problem. That's not to say that you may not feel that way or it may not feel real to you, but at the same time, you can't own someone else's oppression.
I'll add to, as for those who are on the job search and looking, pay attention to what companies have to offer to support your identity group. Whether it's person of color or LGBTQ or person with disabilities, do they have resource groups? Do they actually support employees? Another great way to use the Career Advice Network is to find alumni at the companies you're interested in and actually talk to them. What is it like working there as a Black female? Have those networking conversations, whether you find an alum or you find somebody on LinkedIn. Those are really important conversations to have to know if you're going to be a good fit there. And more companies are creating those support systems. They don't all have it, but they're paying attention more and more every day.
Well, and Cara, I will share, I came out of the closet when I was at UC Santa Cruz 30 some odd years ago. And especially in the early part of my career, I didn't know if I could bring my whole self to the table. And as things have changed, it's gotten much better for me. And I know the last place I worked, it was the most inclusive place for every kind of inclusivity that you can imagine. And it really enabled me to do my best work possible. And so it's really important to find those places that affirm you, because then you can really do your best work.
Mm-hmm. True. Okay. Here's a fun question. What do you think is the opposite of imposter syndrome?
Narcissism. It's narcissism, and I rarely see it, but when I do, people, when I work with clients and they come in and they think they have all the answers and they're doing everything correctly, and we begin to talk about their story, and I can see where there's some blind spots where they haven't done that internal reflection. None of us are perfect, right? None of us are imposters, but neither are any of us perfect. And it's okay for us to acknowledge where there's room for personal growth and professional development, while we're also affirming our personal and professional worth. They're not mutually exclusive. We all have room to grow, and knowing how you need to grow professionally and personally is as important as knowing what your worth is.
True. Yeah. Okay. Not necessarily related to imposter syndrome, but you're a career counselor, so I think I can pitch this to you.
Sure.
How valuable is it to be reading professional articles or technical books that may or may not relate to our careers?
That may or may not relate to your careers. I want to recommend a book called Range. One of my clients actually recommended it to me. And it really talks about how we are more than our particular industry, that when different industries, when different fields come together, that's really where the magic happens, right? So if you think about climate change, for example, climate change, we don't address that by only talking to scientists. We also address those issues by talking to sociologists, by talking to economists, looking at the different ways that humans act to, create the problems that climate change causes. And so I think it's important to be well-read, to be well-rounded, and to have kind of a multiverse perspective on things, because ultimately everything that we do and every problem that we have to solve as humanity is going to be something that's going to be done in an interdisciplinary manner.
True. This is a great way to use LinkedIn too, is to follow topics and professional organizations that you might just be interested in, you're not in right now, but that's a way to bring more of those ideas and concepts a little bit outside your range of thinking into your perspective, and to start thinking about them.
And I also think, Cara, I'm just going to say, this is, the pandemic has been tragic for many of us, myself included, but there has also been some benefits. And one of them are events like this. There are so many webinars, trainings, events that are going on online where you can connect with people around the globe or around the country that you may never have had the opportunity to meet before. I know that's been the case for me, and it's vastly expanded my network and my opportunities. And so I would encourage you, if you're comfortable doing that, to try it out and see what you can find.
It's so true. It's a whole new landscape. Okay, well, I think that's the end of our questions and our Q&A, and we've got just about 5 minutes left. So I think I'll take it to close us out. And if Taylor could share the slides again. We just want to make sure that we share a few resources with you. We've been talking about it the whole session, but here is the Career Advice Network. There's over 1,600 alumni mentors who, and alumni of any age can use this to connect with other peers in industries that they are interested in. Don't be shy. Students can just be mentees, but alumni can be mentors and mentees. And then I'm going to pass it to Taylor for the next couple slides.
Thanks, Cara. So as you know, Career Center is here to provide you resources for career development and anything career. So know that we use Handshake as a platform, and through this platform, you can find job fairs, events, workshops like this, and then also make appointments with our career coaches in our office. Do know that alumni can use these career services, but we ask that you are only a year to a couple years out after graduation. And then also know our Career Success website is full of links, helpful job search tools, resources that really help you in your process. So take advantage of that if you get a chance to look at it. And then some upcoming events that we have are Hire UC Alumni Career Fair on April 28th and 29th. And then Grow Before You Go Gap Year programs on May 4th. The link for upcoming events was inputted into the chat.
Thank you. And yeah, you won't necessarily find the Hire UC Alumni Career Fair on the Career Center on Handshake, but you will find it on the UC Alumni Career Network. And that's a 2-day fair. Employers are doing sessions on the first day, and then there's one-on-one interviews on day 2. And with that, I want to talk a little bit about volunteering. If you are interested in volunteering at UCSC outside of the Career Advice Network, you can email us at alumni@ucsc.edu. And I also want to talk about, this week is Alumni Week, and we like to share the other ways that alumni impact the lives of students. And one of those ways is the Alumni Scholarship Fund, something I'm personally passionate about. Taylor will share the crowdfunding link in there, but this fund has provided $3,000 annual scholarships for those in need and in high academic standing. This year, we awarded 49 of these scholarships, so 49 banana slugs are receiving it. So if you're inspired and you want to give in that way, we encourage you to. And I want to thank Marcia for presenting this workshop today. Wealth of information. The link will be on the Career Success YouTube channel in the next day or two. And on behalf of UC Santa Cruz, I want to thank you all for joining us. Don't forget to fill out that survey after the event, and go on and go to more events this week. I'll see you at the Elephant Seal Tour if you're going to be there, but go Slugs, and thanks for joining us.